Hey there, it's Shauna with Homegrown Self Reliance. So today for the Self Reliant Skill of the Week, we are going to harvest some dock seeds to make a pretty cool foraged treat. This is dock. It grows everywhere in my pasture. So we're just going to harvest some. The little seeds have a husk around them, but they can be ground into a nice flour substitute. They're really easy to harvest. Just take one hand, run it up the plant. Makes pretty quick work of gathering a lot of it. Also, don't worry about taking too much. Each plant has thousands and thousands of seeds. They're almost invasive, actually. I wanted to mention that fall is the best time to identify dock because when it's young and still alive, like right now it's starting to die, but it just has these leaves. They have like a clear gel that grows out of the seeds, or the leaves. The leaves are edible, but they're really best in the spring. But since it is a little harder to identify them in the spring, it's best to note them in the fall, figure out where they're at and where they grow and what they look like. And then the next spring you can come back and harvest them when the leaves are small and tender. The whole plant is edible and medicinal. The roots are a good digestive cleanse and liver cleanse. Leaves are very nutritious. So just check them out in the fall when these tall seed heads pop up. They're kind of reddish brown. Very easy to recognize, very easy to spot. You can usually even see them in the wintertime when there's snow on the ground. So as you can see, it only took me about 15 minutes to pretty much fill up this big bowl of dock seeds. So once you have enough dock seeds, you can do one of two things. If you're just going to store these, you can store them whole in a paper bag. I actually prefer to store most of my herbs whole until I'm ready to use them. So honestly, I would just put these in a paper bag until I'm ready to use them. They may be a little bit dusty, but resist the urge to rinse them. Just don't do it. So at this point you can do one of two things. You can add them to a strainer and move them back and forth to get just the seeds off. But honestly, that is quite time consuming, as you can see. Another option is you can just do them whole, which is what I'm doing here. Honestly, the husks are fine to eat. They're not very nutritious and they just add fiber, but it's really not a big deal. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm just roasting them in a dry cast iron skillet. I'm almost burning them. Don't do that. Keep a closer eye on them than what I'm doing. Just need to do it for a few minutes. It'll just bring out the nutty flavor. Now that we've got our toasted dock seeds, we're going to put them in a grinder. I recently got this little spice grinder. Super cheap. So much nicer than the coffee grinder that I used to use. It is a little on the small side, so it just does small amounts at a time, but that's usually okay for my purposes. Sorry, that was a little hard to do one-handed. This is what it looks like after you give it a couple minutes of pulsing in the grinder. Keep in mind that you want it really nice and fine, close to a powder consistency, so that it doesn't add too much texture to your crackers. So this is the recipe that I'm going to be using. I apologize, I don't remember where I got this recipe. It was a long time ago that I wrote it down. But, so we're starting with 1 cup of curly dock flour, another cup of white flour, or really whatever kind of flour you want. I actually have some wheat flour that I ground myself a few months ago. I'm going to use that. Okay, and then we're going to add a teaspoon of salt. I like using the Himalayan pink salt, so that's what I'm using here. I'm going to mix in all the dry ingredients together. Just make sure all the dry ingredients are all mixed up. And we're going to add water a little at a time. Until we get a pliable dough. Don't want it too sticky though. If it gets too sticky, add a little more flour. Keep in mind, I've never done this before. I've done the recipe a long time ago, but I just haven't used it. But with the talk of possible food shortages coming, I feel like I should be looking into alternate ways of feeding my family. Holds together really nicely. I don't know if I'd call it a dough though. Or maybe. And then we're just going to kind of knead it a little bit. This might be a little too crumbly. I think I'm going to add a little more water. That was really the whole cup.
Maybe a cracker.
All right. So once we get it all mixed up here. I think that looks okay. Keep in mind it's not going to rise or anything like that. It doesn't have any yeast in it. It's just going to stay nice and flat. So I want to flour a cutting board. It's staying together quite nicely, so hopefully this will work the way I want it to. Alright, so we're just going to put it down on the floured surface. Oh, should have known better. Need my rolling pin floured also. Sticking pretty bad here to my rolling pin. We're just gonna roll with it. So I think we want it really quite thin. Well, really not turning out how I wanted. Okay, so maybe we'll just kind of push it nice and thin now. I am just making a mess. I hope you're a little better at this than I am. It's okay. This is an experiment. Most of these don't turn out exactly as I want. And that's usually okay. I'm gonna clean this up a little bit and try it again. Alright, I've got it floured down better and also floured the top of this a little bit. Just gonna try to go in one straight motion. I may have made it a little too sticky adding that much water. Didn't want it to be crumbly. I think it's maybe a delicate balance. But I think this might need to be good enough. Okay. Now we just need to cut our crackers. Don't think it's really gonna matter what we cut it with. Yeah, it cuts pretty nicely.
Give it back. Now. He built it, give it back.
Probably could have used a butter knife just as easily. In the meantime, I have preheated the oven to 375. Looks like those are gonna do okay. It might fall apart a little bit. So that was way more difficult than I anticipated, and I'm hoping that they're thin enough. They might be a little too thick, so we'll see. But we're gonna pop them in the oven for 5 minutes, then flip them over and cook them for about another 5 minutes at 375. All right, this is how they came out after baking for about 10 minutes. Yeah, just as I suspected, they are too thick. I wouldn't exactly call them like a cracker unless I really made them a lot thinner. But the taste is pretty good. I'll definitely eat those with a little thing of cheese or something. It's almost more like a bread, this thick, so it might be fairly easy to make a type of bread loaf with it, as long as it's not too dense. So I'm not sure, but it's very promising. Maybe you'll try it. If you like this video, hit the like button. Go ahead and subscribe to get more tips every week on being more self-reliant. Till next time, see ya.